seminars, Codes 101, the absolute basics of what a code is, why does it even exist, basic history, and I'm not going to go into a long history because you can spend an hour just talking about the individual disasters that led to various building codes being developed. It's interesting for those that find it interesting. I did some of it. It's pretty saddening to know, lives that were taken in order for codes to be developed, or until people felt the need to develop building codes and life safety codes. But more important, it gives you some of the idea of why these are there in the first place. And actually, every code actually has a preface or an introduction in the beginning that tells you why it was originally created, when it was originally created. In fact, the Life Safety Code has a whole first chapter talks about the basic principles as to why it was there. So when talking about what is a code, a little bit on the history, what the heck is an AHJ, otherwise known as the authority having jurisdiction. And is the code actually law? So why is the code even have to be followed? So that's, is it actually a law or not? And then how the heck do you even navigate through these codes? How are they connected to each other? How do you even know where to go and how to look something up? It's not possible to know all code. It's just not possible. It is possible to understand how to go through it. It's simply a process of connecting the dots or following the breadcrumbs of what, starting at one code and going through to the section that you're looking for. Or finding out that that section doesn't exist. There is no requirement for that. Okay, so that's some of the basic topics. So first one I want to talk about, okay, what is a code? First you have what's called, and this sort of goes back also with the history of it. The whole point of the history of the codes was to protect life safety and to protect people that could not protect themselves, or at least give them the ability to get the heck out of the building when it's on fire or in other emergencies. And actually in the life safety code actually talks about, that's the whole point of the life safety code, is really to get people out of the building safely, whether it's from a fire, whether it's from whatever other kind of emergency. It doesn't care about the building at all. The whole point of the life safety, hence life safety, is to get them out. That's all the code cares about, the life safety code cares about, is getting you out. The building code actually cares about that. It also cares about making sure the building is structurally sound so it doesn't fall down for various reasons, that water doesn't get in, that it meets certain energy efficiency standards. All those other rules that, as a society, a civilized society, we have rules to keep people in line or to provide guidance for those who are honestly not smart enough to know it one way or the other, right? That otherwise may go around. You look at any other third world nation, or even non-third world nations that don't have very good building codes. Actually, Haiti is a very good example. When they had the major earthquake in Haiti not long ago, they don't have the building codes that we do, let alone the fact that there's no way to enforce them, and they don't have the money to even build according to codes. They have unreinforced masonry buildings. So they have all this concrete and concrete block with no steel in it. When you get an earthquake, so it just crumbles like it's, like it's just dry mud. It's basically not far from it. So they just crumble into nothing. Thousands of people died. That's why codes were started. They're to keep people safe, and also just for some basic rules of how do you build something, how do you save the energy in a building. They're always in reference to a building. Building codes are, and as well as the life safety codes. Now, there's a lot of other codes. There's zoning codes, development codes, etc. And they're, for similar reasons, they're there to guide the development of a city, of a region, etc. Environmental laws, etc. They're all variations on that similar concept. So, how the heck does a code become, or is it the law? And then, what makes it, I guess, the code? We throw around the word the code a lot. A jurisdiction, so you've got the federal government, which dictates certain rights and, say, not privileges, but certain responsibilities to the states to delegate laws throughout the state. So the federal government has certain laws that everybody in the U.S. must follow. Then the states have additional laws that everybody in that state must follow. Then you have local jurisdictions of county, city, etc. So they go slowly down through the different jurisdictions. Each of those jurisdictions has laws to protect the citizens within them. And everybody has, in some way, some sort of legislative or governing board. You've got, the U.S. Congress, then the state has its legislature, then you've got city council members for a city, you've got council, or you've got, for county, you've got various different kinds of boards and such. And all of them pass laws to protect. Well, most people can't write an entire code on their own. They're allowed to. In fact, if you look through the various laws that are passed by those legislative bodies, they say that you're allowed to make your own code up. You could write an entire code from scratch on your own. Most cities and jurisdictions don't have that kind of funds to sit there and have somebody write their own code from scratch. So what do? There are certain organizations, either nonprofit or for-profit. NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, is one. The International, I'll say it wrong, the International Code Council is another one, ICC. This is a third-party organization, non-governmentally related, nonprofit. All they do is write. They come up with a standard. They come up with a book. It is not the code. It is not law. It is just a book. Somebody wrote all the rules down that they think are a good idea. That's it. Then that legislative board, whether it's the city, county, state, or federal, says, I like your book. It meets the standards we want. We might want to change a few things, which they absolutely can. Then they adopt that book as law. So the code is not law until adopted by a jurisdiction. That jurisdiction is the authority that adopts the code. Once they adopt that code, they are the authority now having jurisdiction over that area. So if you want a building permit in our city, you must go to the city and get a building permit. And they say, okay, well, we passed the law that says you must follow our code, which is based upon, say, the 2012 International Building Code. And actually, I'm going to go to the website. So this is actually the city of Georgetown. So the city of Georgetown's site, of course, I'm on the wrong screen. Why is it showing that? That's fine. Why is it showing that? Okay, we'll check a bit. Yeah, it's on the wrong screen. That's why. Okay. Still set up for two screen. So this is the municipal. This is the city of Georgetown municipal ordinances. These are the codes of the city of Georgetown as defined by city council, as voted upon by city council. And so this is chapter 15 of their code, known as the building code. And you can see here under this particular section, and this was actually the most recently amended by ordinance 2014-44. They voted on it, said aye, nay, etc. And it says the provisions of the International Building Code, this book as written by the ICC, the 2012 edition, including various appendices within, because they're not automatically. There's several appendices in here that say they must be individually adopted. They're not referenced, and I'll get back to what reference means. And then there's specific local amendments. So you'll see them down below here. They amended the title to say Building Code of the City of Georgetown instead of just saying Building Code in that section. They changed various flood hazard areas. They changed some work that's exempt from permits. They rewrote several sections. They changed it. They amended it as part of adopting this book. Because like I said, they can write their own book. They can also change any word they want in this book, or all of it. But it's a lot of expense. City of Fort Worth doesn't like delayed egress locks. We use them all the time in their single assisted living. They deleted the entire section. They 100% deleted them and rewrote their whole section from scratch. Now, it doesn't match any other jurisdictions, ultimate locking arrangements, and it makes it rather difficult in terms of conflicts between the code, basically meaning that the most strict governs, which is you can't lock it. What can happen? They can rewrite anything they want. So by adopting this, and they say, the building code shall establish regulations for structures, processes, premises, and safeguards. That's sort of the political, mumbo jumbo they add to it. But now, this code, this book, which was just a book, is now law in the city of Georgetown. You want to build, you'll follow their law. So this is now their book. Anything they've changed in this is the law. So if you were to go back and say, I don't agree with the city of Georgetown, because the code says this, and if you go to the ICC and say, they're not doing it right, they're going to go, they're the authority having jurisdiction. We just write the text. They adopted it. If they choose to change it, totally up to them. If they choose to interpret it differently, totally up to them. If you don't like it, don't build in the city of Georgetown. It's just that simple. Once it's adopted, it's their law. So, there's a number of other ones. How does the federal government do that? Well, the federal government also has, we deal with another law all the time called the Texas Accessibility Standards, or ADA is another one. Okay, well, what the heck is ADA? And why do we have to follow these standards that come out? Well, this is just in regarding accessibility. The American with Disabilities Act is an act passed by the U.S. Congress which prohibits discrimination based upon disabilities. So they passed a law that says you can't have architectural barriers that get in the way of somebody that has disabilities. And the state has a very similar one called the Texas Architectural Barriers Act, and it's in the Government Code, Chapter 469. The Government Code is literally is a code that is changed by every House bill or Senate bill that is passed. It changes the government code. It's not the rules. It's the law that says the state shall now make rules to do this, but this is the law. So this is actually, and then what happens is this is the law passed by Congress. Congress doesn't do the rules. They don't administer them. They don't enforce them. If we require the legislature to enforce the rules, that's what the police do. That's what the code enforcement people do. That's what these other agencies do. The U.S. Department of Justice administers the requirements of that law. They wrote the standards, the rules that we have to follow to comply with that law. So if you follow the rules that the U.S. Department of Justice wrote, which is called the 2010 standards, then you're meeting the intent of that law. In the state of Texas, to meet the intent of this act, this government code section, you follow the Texas Texas Accessibility Standards, which are administered by TDLR, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. So they say, here, we wrote the rules. For you to meet that law, these are the rules. So they're, again, until actually written down, and if they're the ones who wrote the rules required by the legislature, the rules are now law. You must follow them. And they're the ones that enforce them. Same thing, if you violate the American with Disabilities Act, you violate those rules, the Department of Justice is who goes after you. If you violate the Texas Disability Standards, TDLR goes after you. Because they're the authority having jurisdiction. They're the ones who wrote the rules or adopted the rules as their own law. Now, and there's a whole lot more to get into accessibility, but okay, one that we deal with all the time, how about on assisted living facilities? Why do we have regulations for assisted living facilities? Well, the Texas legislature has the Health and Safety Code. So this is not an administrative code. These are not the rules. This is the law, as in the state of Texas. And there's also a law that says you can't kill anybody. It's under a different chapter, but it's the law in Texas that capital murder to, kill somebody. But that's the law. The Congress doesn't, or legislature doesn't enforce that law. The police do, or the sheriffs, or the state patrol. They're the ones that enforce the law, Department of Protective Services, etc. So this case is health facilities and the licensing. So this was actually amended, this section was amended by the 84th legislature by Senate Bill 219. They amended this section of the code as recently as that particular one, which actually goes all the way to September 1st, 1999. It'll be the last time that this one right here was amended. This is the code changed by the legislature. And it says, here's the purpose of this law. And if you've ever read a Senate bill, it's like, whereas we, it's all the legal jargon. But at the end it says, the purpose of this chapter is to ensure that assisted living facilities have the highest level of care. And for the purposes, these is what care entails. Then it says the department that administers it, which in this case is the Department of Aging and Disability Services. That is the government department that writes the rules and enforces them to meet this code. Well, it says the department shall protect residents of assisted living facilities by adopting rules relating to the quality of care, regulating the construction, maintenance, and operation of assisted living facilities. So the Texas legislature has said, okay, Department of Aging and Disability Services, write the rules and enforce them. The agency now having jurisdiction over those rules is that department, by law, under the Texas legislature. So it's the law. You have to follow it. And it's simple. There's all these books of handbooks, and all the handbooks are simply nicer printed versions of the law. That's all it is. Now, this is the code, so then what's the rules that you have to follow that the department wrote? Well, then you can go to the Texas, get the same one. You go to the Texas Administrative Code. This is actually the rules. These are the rules written by the various departments. They had to write the rules because the legislature says, department, write the rules. Here's your rules. Chapter 19 of the Texas Administrative Code. This is under the Secretary of State's office. Chapter 19 is all the requirements for nursing facilities for licensure and Medicaid. So if you want a licensed nursing facility, or it also says what is a licensed nursing facility, you must follow everything in that chapter. If you want to do an assisted living, it's chapter 92, and you must follow all of these standards if you want to be licensed. If you don't want to be licensed, fine. But you also can't provide care for more than 4 people without being licensed. Otherwise, you're breaking the law, and you can face civil and criminal penalties, because it's the law that you must be licensed. So, the facility construction requirements, so I'm just going down various subchapters of this administrative code. The one we follow all the time is 9262, which is basic requirements of facility construction for an assisted living. So these are your rules. It's the thou shalt not kill anybody, thou shalt, it's all those other ones like any other, you think about all these laws. These are all the rules to meet the law that says, if you want to be in an assisted living facility, you must follow the rules the Department of Aging and Disability Services comes up with. So one of the biggest arguments against any code or regulation when people don't like what they get from a surveyor or from an inspector or whatever is, well, they can't do that. Like, well, no, they can. If it's any way interpretable, they win. They wrote it. They enforce it, period. Now, if they just start making stuff up, totally making stuff up, and it's totally contrary to this, then you've got to stay with that department. You can't just go complaining to the city because the state wants you to do this. It's 2 separate government bodies, 2 separate jurisdictions. So we get the thing all the time that dads comes in and says, this is wrong. And they're looking at the standards and they're looking at their codes as adopted. And then the city has already gone through their stuff and they've okayed everything. And you get, well, the fire marshal said it was okay. Well, that's great. They have their rules as adopted, or their law. The state also has their law. You got to meet both if you want to be an assisted living facility. Or we joke, if you don't want to be a large assisted living facility, then you have the biggest bed and breakfast in Texas. Nobody says it has to be an assisted living facility. But if you want it to be, you have to follow these rules. And the people who decide if those rules are followed is the other group. The other fire marshal doesn't matter at that point. I mean, that's like arguing with the city of Georgetown because the city landowner wants you to do something and doing a building permit. Well, they're two separate jurisdictions. They both have their own requirements, but they're separate. So, you saw in the first one, the city of Georgetown, and what I wanted to talk about, this is one of the sort of the latter ones, is all these codes, there's so many of them, but they all start from a basic reference code. And what I mean by that is they start with, I'll go back to that, the city of Georgetown. Most of them adopt a basic building code or a life safety code or a couple of the major ones. And for the city of Georgetown, you'll see that they've adopted the building code. Then what they've also adopted, if you keep going, it actually talks about the adoption of a residential code for houses, a mechanical code, a plumbing code, an energy conservation code. So they have some of these basic codes. Well, they adopt like 6 or 7 codes. Well, for those of us who do this all the time know there's a whole lot more standards and codes that we talk about. We talk about the National Electrical Code. We talk about various, NFPA 1 through 5,000 that have numbers through 5,000, and we don't use. There's about 70 or 80 of them that we use all the time. Well, where the heck do they come from? In the first couple chapters of every code, and the IBC and NFPA, they're the same. They talk about referenced standards, and that should be right here in front. But there's a section right here that basically says the following codes or the following standards, wherever they're referenced in this book, they're now included as if already in the book. So if it says, okay, if you're going to put in gas-fired equipment, you must follow NFPA 54 standards for natural gas and fire equipment. Then that's now part of this code. It might as well be added to the back. Because if it's referenced in here, now it's part of this code. And I went right past it. But actually, here are the reference standards for the building code. This list of all these different codes, these are all referenced in the building code. These are various standards by ASTM, by NFPA. These are all groups that just write stuff. None of this stuff is in code until adopted. And what they do is, it says in the very beginning, if it's referenced in here, it's also adopted as code. If it's referenced in this book and you adopted this one, by reference, you adopted all the other ones that go with it. So we, in nursing and assisted living, dads, and also because the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services federally adopts the 2000 edition of Life Safety Code, in it references the 99 edition of the fire sprinkler of NFPA 13. It references the 1997 version of another one. It references the 99 version of another. You have to follow all those as if they're part of this book because they're referenced in it. So let's say, okay, I gotta go look. I have a sprinkler issue. Well, you know that if this is the basic standard you gotta meet, you go look at the reference standard. It says go look at the 99 version of NFPA 13. Then you go to the 99 version of NFPA 13. That's the requirements you gotta meet. Now, if you have 2 different jurisdictions, which we do all the time, okay, the city says you gotta meet the 2012 building code, which references NFPA 13, the 2010 version. This one says you gotta meet NFPA 13, the 1999 version. 11 years difference between the 2 codes. You have to meet both. If one allows you to do something, the other one doesn't, you don't do it. If they, if one says that, yeah, you can, now it says, no, you can't. You can't. It's the strictest of the 2. And if people go, oh, there's always a conflict. No, there's never a conflict in the code. I've never seen a conflict in the code. it's a conflict with maybe what you might want. But it's not actually a conflict. A good example is that Fort Worth issue. One code says, yes, you can use delayed egress locks. So you can have a 15-second delay before you go out. The other one that they adopted, and they rewrote that section, got rid of delayed egress locks. Your option is to not lock it. Because one says you can, one says you can't. Well, one says you can't, that one wins. But what they say you can do in Fort Worth doesn't meet this one. So now you don't lock your doors. You hire more staff to keep them from going out. You put alarms on the doors, but you can't lock them. You go, well, that's a conflict. No, it's not a conflict. It's just not what you want. Because the two had different, ideas. But that's the basics of when it comes to an authority having jurisdiction, being the one that gets to make all the rules. They did make the rules. That's the whole point. Now, when you deal with inspectors and surveyors, which we're talking much lower down in the pecking order, than those who may have actually adopted the rules, it doesn't matter. They still represent the jurisdiction that adopted those rules. Now, if they just start making stuff up, that's where you go above them within their jurisdiction to go, hey, okay, your inspector over here in the electrical, I don't think he's read the book. We gotta change something, this isn't working. And then, but you have to be able to justify it and say, well, no, it says this. He's requiring us to do this. Now, this boss may go, yeah, you're right, no, it's not. But you get other ones that go, well, I don't overturn anything my inspectors say. You're sort of SOL at that point, because they're the ones that get to say yes or no. And if his boss said, no, well, you can go higher, you start to piss people off, higher you go, but they're the ones that get to make the rules, therefore they're the ones that get to say yes or no on it. So when it comes to these standards, it's simply a matter of knowing who's in charge of what you're doing. If we're building, for example, our building, it's just the city of Leander. That's the only people that had jurisdiction over this building. So we only had to deal with them. We had one basic code to follow, and all the codes that go underneath it. I didn't have to worry about the life safety code for this building at all. Because no jurisdiction in Leander has adopted the life safety code. But if I wanted to turn this into an assisted living, now I have a state organization as their own, now I gotta make local. And so that's what you run into in these facilities that we do all over the state, is that you have more than one group in charge. And you have to make them both happy, or you don't get to have your whole thing. But by knowing who's in charge, you can see what code has been passed by them, what the rules are that they've written, and then you can follow through those rules simply by going to the book and following through the various other codes that are referenced underneath it. That's a whole other topic, is in terms of how are they all organized. We'll get into other ones such as how is the life safety code organized, where the heck do you start when you even open the book, because it's still a big book to start out with. How do you even, start it out? But if you don't understand the basics of what's a code, reading the book doesn't begin again. If you have to understand what you're actually reading at that point. Because actually, if you don't have the amendments with you, you're not actually looking at the real code. You're looking at the book that was written by the FCC. But if you don't have the amendments with it, it may change something. You can get yourself in trouble in Fort Worth if you start putting in the wrong box because you read the regular book and not their version of the book. So, and they keep a copy at City Hall or whatever it is of the actual amended book. But they're all available online. Everything you've seen here are totally free. The accessibility standard and even the ICC, all the building codes are free online. In fact, the one you see most of my stuff up here is free stuff. Here's the International Code Council's stuff. So here's all the building codes, at least through 2012. And it's a little tougher to navigate, but there's the entire 2012 building code. So I can go in and look at exactly the text online. I can copy and paste it. It's all available there. I don't have to keep books, but I really can go look to the book. And then I have to be able to allow the stuff in PDF and my Word form actually for the stuff we use. But it's almost all of it is one. There are some of the smaller standards, a lot of the NFPA standards, and then you get into other referenced ones like this one for the IES and ANSI, this is the American National Standard. And this is actually the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America's guidelines for the hospital and healthcare facilities. And there's another one for senior living. This is referenced in the assisted living and nursing regulations. But you have to follow this. This is not free. You have to order it. It's like $60 for that. And now there's another one for senior living that's even skinnier, and that's like $60. And there's other standards out there like the elevator code. Oh, it's ridiculously expensive. And we don't follow most of it because we don't install elevators, but there's stuff in there we need to know about. And so some of it is tough to keep track of, and every time they come out with a new code, you're going to buy new stuff. Because in the state of Texas, the minimum code is 2003 IBC. So if you're not in the city, you're supposed to meet the 2003 IBC, or 6 actually, I think it was updated to 6. But they keep coming up with new ones, and you follow the new ones. Because we're all the way up to the 2015 now. So I think that is the majority of what I want to talk about on my topics here before I forget. So, any questions about what is an AHJ or what the heck is a code when we talk about it? We use the word standard as well. The standard is nothing but this. It's another book, but it's referenced within the code. Therefore, it is now also part of the code.
Is it safe to say that every community, no matter how small it is, would have some form of code?
Every city in the state of Texas is actually, they are required to adopt at a minimum that basic standard, or they can write their own to the equivalent safety level of whatever that is, at 2006 IBC. So the state actually says in the local government code, which is passed by the legislature, says, okay, cities, we're going to let you govern yourself, but you must have these things in place.
So a township would adopt from what the closest city is? In
this case, in the state of Texas, it's city limits is where they enforce a building code. Beyond that, the counties have no ability. The local government code in the state of Texas does not grant the county the right to pass a building code. So in Williamson County, outside of the city limits, there's no building codes. Not enforced. Now, technically, it says you must meet, the state says you still got to build it per the building code, this minimum one. But there's nobody to enforce it, nobody to inspect it. My house that I built is outside city limits. There was no inspection on it.
But then they also have ETJs.
And the ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction, allows them, this is per the governmental authority again, per the government code, local government code. In the ETJ, they have additional responsibilities of planning and managing the land, but not enforcement of the building code. So they're allowed to do development, do developments and work out, municipal utility districts and other planning, but they can't enforce building codes. They can't even adopt a building code outside of the city limits. And that's not typical around the United States. In Florida, if you're in the city limits, you follow the building code of that city. If you're in the county has adopted the building code. Under Florida law, they're allowed to, or actually they're required to. So Orange County, which encompasses Orlando, Orange County has a bigger area than the city of Orlando does, and so they've got a lot. It takes longer to get a building permit in a county than it does the city because there's a lot more going on. Texas is an unusual one that outside the city limits, there's no building code. It's not enforceable, but it's unless somebody complained and filed a lawsuit with basically the state saying this contractor did not build per the building code outside of it, and somebody died in a fire, etc. The code says, the government, the law says, you still got to follow that basic building code. Then it comes down to, now you're talking about a state lawsuit and trying to figure out as to did it meet, did it not meet, because there was nobody that inspected or enforced it. It's a little bit tricky, I guess, that's the limits. But the rules are still the same. The county doesn't, the Texas legislature did not give the counties the ability to pass a building code. So they legally just can't do it. There's nothing that allows them to do that. But the city can, as the state said, cities, you must pass a building code. And there have been pushes to give the counties that ability. A lot, actually, especially in West Texas, like El Paso and some other ones. They've really pushed to try to let the cities pass a residential code at minimum, because there's a lot of construction that goes on in the valley and in West Texas that is not up to the basic building code. Because the systems are very small, half those larger expanses, and they want the counties to have some ability to go after people that are doing it wrong. So, any other questions? Did anybody learn something on this one? Even something low?
How bureaucratic it is.
Well, that's good. At least you know that part. But if you understand the basics of just why is it a law, why is it a code, what the hell is an AHJ, then that's critical to knowing all the rest of this stuff, and even talking about anything